All right, so today we are going to do a deep dive into some really interesting research on osteoarthritis.
Yeah,
Um, and
it's really cutting edge.
yeah, and it could really change the game for a lot of people who are struggling with osteoarthritis.
Absolutely. Millions and millions of people
Yeah.
worldwide.
And it's tough because the treatments that are available now, they're really not that great.
Yeah, they just address the symptoms, really. They're not doing anything to actually
Right.
fix the problem.
Yeah, they're not disease modifying.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so what we're looking at today is a 2023 research paper. It was published in Aging, Albany, NY.
Hmm?
And this research is focused on something called hUC-MSCs-Exos. Have you heard of this before?
Yes, I have. It's a very exciting new area of research.
Okay, so what exactly are hUC-MSCs-Exos?
Well, think of them as like tiny little packages that are released by stem cells.
Okay.
And these stem cells are found in umbilical cord tissue.
Oh, wow. So we're talking about something that's usually just discarded after birth. And it could actually hold the key to treating osteoarthritis.
Yes, it's pretty amazing.
That's incredible. So how do these hUC-MSCs-Exos actually work to combat osteoarthritis?
Well, stem cells have been something that we've looked at for a long time to treat things like OA because they can modulate inflammation.
Okay.
And we think that they can help regenerate tissue.
Mm.
But the problem is that using stem cells directly, it's difficult.
Yeah, it seems like it would be really invasive.
It can be.
And there's always the risk of rejection.
Right.
Why?
But with these exosomes from the umbilical cord,
Okay.
we're basically getting the benefits of stem cells without having to worry about those drawbacks.
So it's like a more targeted approach.
Exactly. And it's potentially safer as well.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So this research paper that we're looking at, what exactly did they do?
So they used 2 in vitro models to simulate the environment inside an arthritic joint.
Okay.
So one model focused on the inflammatory process, and they used a molecule called IL-1 to kind of kickstart that, because we know that plays a huge role in OA.
Right.
And then the other model looked at how these hUC-MSCs-Exos interact with immune cells called M1 macrophages.
And those are the cells that are basically causing the damage to the cartilage, right?
Yeah, they contribute a lot to the damage
Oh.
in osteoarthritis.
So they were really trying to mimic what's actually happening in a joint.
Yeah, they wanted to see how these exosomes would behave in a more realistic setting.
That makes a lot of sense. So what did they find?
So they found that these hUC-MSCs-Exos actually had some pretty remarkable effects.
Okay.
They reduced inflammation,
Okay.
and they also boosted the production of COL2A1, which is a really important component of cartilage.
So not only are they reducing the bad stuff,
Right.
they're actually helping to build up the good stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing.
They also found that they decreased the levels of MMP13, which is an enzyme that breaks down cartilage.
Oh, wow.
So it's a double whammy. They're protecting the cartilage and helping to rebuild it at the same time.
This is all starting to sound very promising. So how are they actually doing all of this? What's a mechanism behind these effects?
Okay, so one of the key mechanisms involves these little molecules called miRNAs. miRNAs, yeah, they're like tiny little messengers
Okay.
that are carried inside the exosomes,
Mm-hmm.
and they can actually regulate gene expression in cells.
Wow. So they're basically telling the cells what to do.
Exactly, and in this study, the researchers analyzed the miRNAs that were present in these hUC-MSCs-Exos.
Oh, wow. So they were really trying to get down to the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, they wanted to figure out exactly how these exosomes were working their magic.
That's fascinating. And what did they find?
They found that some of the miRNAs that were really abundant in the hUC-MSCs-Exos have already been shown to have a role in cartilage health.
Really?
Yeah, like miRNA 21,5P
Okay.
and miRNA 146A. And these miRNAs are known to be involved in things like reducing inflammation and promoting cartilage formation.
So these little packages are packed with instructions that can actually help to heal the joint.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That's incredible. And they also looked at how these exosomes were affecting those M1 macrophages, right?
Yes, they did. And they found that the hUC-MSCs-Exos were actually able to protect the cartilage cells from the damage caused by the macrophages.
So they're not just fighting the inflammation, they're actually shielding the cartilage from further damage.
Exactly.
This is truly groundbreaking stuff.
It is, and it just goes to show how much potential these hUC-MSCs-Exos have for treating OA and maybe even other diseases too.
This is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, there's so much more to learn and explore.
I'm definitely intrigued. So where do we go from here?
Well, let's dive a little deeper into what these findings could actually mean for the future of OA treatment and see what else we can uncover about these fascinating hUC-MSCs-Exos.
Okay, so we know what these hUC-MSCs-Exos are, and we know how they work, but what does this mean for people with osteoarthritis?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that this isn't just some abstract scientific discovery.
Right.
This could really change people's lives.
If
Imagine a future where instead of just managing pain, we're actually rebuilding cartilage, restoring joint function,
Right.
giving people back their mobility.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. But how far off is that future really? I mean, what are the next steps to make this a real treatment?
Of course, more research is always needed.
Sure.
We need larger studies, clinical trials, all the rigorous testing that goes into developing any new therapy.
Right.
But this research, it really lays a solid foundation.
Okay.
It shows us that these hUC-MSCs-Exos can really make a difference.
So it's not just a pipe dream.
No, it's a
Yeah.
real possibility, and I think what makes this even more exciting is the source of these exosomes.
Yeah.
We're talking about umbilical cord tissue.
Right, something that's usually just discarded.
Exactly, and yet it has this incredible potential for healing.
That's pretty amazing.
It is, and for people with OA, this could mean a whole new lease on life, less pain, greater mobility, the chance to get back to doing the things they love.
No, I have to admit, I find all this talk about miRNAs and pathways fascinating.
Yeah.
But I can also see how it might be a little bit overwhelming for people who don't have a scientific background.
Sure.
So how would you explain this research to someone who's maybe struggling with OA themselves?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think a good way to think about it is like in osteoarthritis, the communication between cells in your joints, it gets messed up.
Okay.
They're sending out the wrong signals,
Mm-hmm.
causing inflammation and damage. And these hUC-MSCs-Exos, they act like translators,
Okay.
delivering a message of healing and repair.
I like that analogy.
So they're basically hitting the reset button on those faulty signals,
Okay.
allowing the cells to work together again.
So it's like they're restoring order to the chaos.
Exactly. And what's really exciting is that this research isn't just about OA.
Okay.
It opens up a whole new avenue for exploring these hUC-MSCs-Exos in other inflammatory conditions as well.
Now tell me more about these broader implications. What other diseases could potentially benefit from this type of therapy?
Well, think about any condition where inflammation is a key driver.
Okay.
Rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease,
Mm-hmm.
even neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
So if these hUC-MSCs-Exos can modulate inflammation in OA, could they potentially do the same in these other diseases?
It's certainly a possibility worth exploring. Imagine if we could harness the power of these tiny packages to calm down the immune system in rheumatoid arthritis or protect brain cells from inflammation in Alzheimer's.
The possibilities are pretty mind-boggling.
They are, and while this research is still in its early stages,
Sure.
it's definitely ignited a spark of hope and possibility.
It's a reminder that even in the face of these really challenging diseases, there's always room for innovation and discovery.
Absolutely, and who knows what incredible breakthroughs are waiting for us as we continue to explore these hUC-MSCs-Exos.
Now, before we get too carried away with all the potential applications, let's take a closer look at some of the details from this research.
Okay.
What stood out to you as being particularly significant?
Well, one of the things that really impressed me was how detailed their analysis of the miRNAs was.
Oh,
They didn't just identify them, they actually quantified how much of each miRNA was present.
okay.
And that gives us some really valuable clues about how they might be working.
So it's like taking inventory.
Exactly, like
Yeah.
figuring out which messengers are the most important.
And did they find anything interesting?
Oh yeah. For example, they found high levels of miRNA 21,5P, which we talked about earlier, promotes cartilage formation.
Right.
And they also found a lot of miRNA 146, which is a powerful anti-inflammatory.
So it's like having a team of specialists, each with their own unique skills.
That's a great way to put it, and by understanding these individual miRNAs, researchers might be able to make these hUC-MSCs-Exos even more effective.
Okay, so that's the miRNAs. What about the co-culture model, the one where they looked at the chondrocytes and the M1 macrophages?
Yes, that model gives us a much more realistic picture of what's happening in a joint.
Right, because it's not just the cartilage cells in isolation.
Exactly, and what they found was that the hUC-MSCs-Exos didn't just protect the chondrocytes from damage. They also seem to change the behavior of the macrophages themselves,
Really?
making them less aggressive.
So it's like these exosomes are acting as peacekeepers.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. They're calming down the inflammatory response,
Mm.
promoting a more harmonious environment within the joint.
It's amazing how these tiny packages can have such a big impact.
It is, and it really highlights the interconnectedness of everything.
You know, I have to admit, all this talk about cells and molecules can sometimes feel a bit abstract.
Yeah.
But there's something about this research that just feels different.
I know what you mean. There's a sense of hope and possibility that's really hard to ignore.
It's like we're seeing a real shift in how we approach disease treatment. Instead of just fighting the enemy, we're learning to speak the body's language
Right.
and guide it towards healing.
It's a much more holistic approach.
And one that I think holds immense potential for the future of medicine. Now, I know that no new medical advancement comes without its challenges. So what are some of the hurdles that researchers will need to overcome before this becomes a reality for patients?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is scalability.
Okay.
Producing enough of these hUC-MSCs-Exos to meet the potential demand.
Right. It's one thing to prove it works in a lab, but it's another thing entirely to make it available to millions of people.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of storage and delivery. These exosomes are delicate.
Right.
We need to figure out how to keep them stable and make sure they reach their target cells.
So it's not just about making them, it's about making sure they can do their job.
Exactly. And of course, there's the regulatory landscape to navigate any new therapy has to go through rigorous testing,
Right.
clinical trials to make sure it's safe and effective before it can be approved for widespread use.
That's a long and complicated process, but a necessary one.
It is. We need to make sure that this therapy is not only effective, but also safe for patients in the long run.
Absolutely. So while there are definitely challenges ahead, it sounds like there's a lot of optimism surrounding this research.
Oh, absolutely. And that optimism is fueled by the incredible potential of this therapy to really transform how we treat a wide range of diseases.
It's a really exciting time to be following this field.
It is, and I have no doubt that we'll see even more groundbreaking discoveries in the years to come.
This is just the beginning of the hUC-MSCs-Exos story.
Exactly.
So it really seems like we're on the verge of something big here.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
These tiny little packages from umbilical cord tissue could really change how we treat some of these really tough diseases.
It really speaks to the power of science, doesn't it? Just finding new things in unexpected places.
Exactly. And speaking of new things, you mentioned that these hUC-MSCs-Exos could be used for more than just osteoarthritis.
Right.
What other conditions are researchers excited about?
Well, autoimmune diseases are a big one.
Okay.
Things like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, inflammatory bowel disease, all these diseases where your immune system is basically attacking your own body.
Right, and inflammation is a huge part of that.
Exactly. So the idea is that these hUC-MSCs-Exos could calm down that immune response and prevent more damage.
And is there any evidence that this might actually work?
Yeah. There's some promising research in animal models.
Okay.
Like in rheumatoid arthritis, studies have shown that these exosomes can reduce inflammation in the joints and protect the cartilage.
So there's real hope that these tiny packages could help people with these debilitating diseases.
Absolutely. And it's not just autoimmune diseases either.
Okay.
Researchers are also looking at them for neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Wow, now those are some tough ones. What makes them think that these exosomes could work for those?
Well, we're learning more and more about how inflammation plays a role in these diseases.
Okay.
It seems like chronic inflammation in the brain can really damage neurons.
So if these hUC-MSCs-Exos can reduce inflammation in other parts of the body, could they do the same in the brain?
That's what they're hoping to find out. And there's some early evidence that it might be possible.
Like what?
Well, in animal models of Alzheimer's, they've seen that these exosomes can improve cognitive function and reduce the buildup of those amyloid plaques.
You mean the ones that are a hallmark of Alzheimer's?
Exactly. It's still early days, but it's definitely exciting.
It is. It sounds like a whole new world of possibilities is opening up.
It really does, and that's what makes science so amazing.
You know, we've talked a lot about the potential benefits,
Yeah.
but what about the unknowns? What are some of the big questions that researchers are still trying to answer?
Well, one of the big ones is delivery.
Okay.
How do we make sure these exosomes get to the right place in the body and actually get inside the cells they need to?
So it's not just about making them, it's about making sure they can do their job.
Right. And another question is personalization.
Okay.
Everyone's body is different, so we need to figure out how to tailor this therapy to each individual.
That makes sense. So how do we know who will benefit the most and how much they need?
Exactly, and that's going to take a lot more research and clinical trials.
But even with all these challenges, it seems like there's a lot of excitement about the future of hUC-MSCs-Exos.
Oh, definitely. The potential is just too big to ignore.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. It's been a fascinating deep dive.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us. We hope you found this discussion informative and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Remember, science is full of wonder and possibility, so keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions.
And who knows, maybe we'll be back with another deep dive into these hUC-MSCs-Exos in the future. But until then, keep diving deep.